Hey everybody, how's it going? Dan Shindy here on Yes Shift with,
Even Shinder.
and we are thrilled to have first time offender. Just like last week, we had John Weathers on of Gentle Giant, and today we're excited to have Derek Shulman, not only of Gentle Giant but of Polygram, Atco, Roadrunner Records, established 2+ Music. Back in, I think, 2010, and of course was very instrumental in signing, wow, a lot of bands that you folks have stumbled to your car after going to see Silurenda, Kingdom Come, Bon Jovi, Dream Theater, reviving careers of some flash in the pan bands like AC/DC and Bad Company. Not familiar, but I'm sure they're good. Derek, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you guys?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, thanks for taking time. We really appreciate it. Steve, go ahead and kick it off. I don't even know what you're doing with everything.
Yeah, so kind of going back to last week, one of our viewers, Roger Manito, was curious about how John Weathers got to sing lead vocals on the song Friends. So what's the story there?
That's a good point, actually. That was the story. The story about that was it was a piece written kind of like with John. John kind of had an idea, and Kerry helped him. And John's got a great voice. I mean, he sings. He sang on stage together with us, and it was a nicer sort of a quieter piece. And Kerry usually sang the quieter pieces on record, but we said, John, give it a shot. And John said, okay, I'll try it. And in fact, it turned out extremely well. So John, it was something that we threw at John and as a kind of curveball. And he said, let me pick it up and let me try. And it came out very well. So really it was something that we all said, come on, you're a singer as well. Go for it. And it basically, turned up on the album.
Yeah, it's a really nice piece. Being both of us, Steve and myself, and a lot of people watching on Yes Shift, and we're simulcasting on Drum Talk TV as well, are huge Roger Dean fans. What was it like working with him for the cover of Octopus? We heard he's really hard to work with. No, I'm kidding. What was it like, though, getting with Roger, and how did that come about?
Well, back in the day, I mean, Roger, when we signed our original deal with Vertigo, he was basically the go-to artist for a lot of Vertigo artists. And he didn't just do Yes and
Right.
He did Osabisa, Horse.
Right,
He was a go-to artist. I mean, it wasn't Roger Dean, the sort of the artist that everyone knows that Yes works with. But back in the day, he was the guy that did the cover, and we had a couple of other guys give Octopus a shot, but he came up with this fantastic cover, and it turned out to be the album you see in rest of the world. We had a different cover in North America, but Roger he was the guy, basically the go-to guy, and the guy that hired him was a guy called Jerry Braun, who was our manager at the time. So we were just, let's get Roger. He's good.
And you make such a good point. He's so synonymous with Yes, but yet, even though you can see Roger Dean in Roger Dean's work, whether it was with you guys or Uriah Heep or any of these other bands, he didn't make it all look the same. Like even Asia doesn't look like Yes covers. And I think that's the mark of a really true visual artist, to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think Roger, I think the Octopus cover is kind of different to a lot of his other works, actually.
Definitely.
It's actually quite a little more lifelike and less sort of airy fairy, kind of like
phantasmical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which I like. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, he didn't eat mushrooms that day.
Maybe that's right. I didn't think about that.
And then we know that in the early days you toured with Yes. I know Steve is very curious about that.
Yeah. Do you have any particular memories to share about being on the road and playing a few shows with them and other bands as well, for that matter?
Yeah, but Yes were back when Yes were started in 78, 77. So they had a bit of a head start on Gentle Giant. So when we toured with them, that was, I think, 1972 in North America. And I think they were promoting either, which one was it? Wasn't Fragile. It was the
Close to the Edge.
Close to the Edge album. And they were superb. Honestly, they were really, really together. And their stage show was fantastic. I mean, they were great musicians, and the show was fantastic. We opened for them, and to be honest, I think that when we played a couple of shows, we got a very, very good reception. This is our first North American tour. There was a little concern on their side that we were a little too good for them to get. We had a standing ovation. We had an encore, and I don't know whether it was their manager or something or whoever it was, but I think as the tour progressed, the stage of our stage that we were allowed to live on, if you like, and the lights we were allowed to use became less and less.
Mm.
There was that element of, well, you guys are pretty damn good, so we're gonna, make sure you don't get quite as much airspace, if you like, than
Crazy.
Anyway, but it was fun. They were great. I mean, they were really great musicians, and I knew them. I've known them afterwards. I've worked with them after, after the whole band thing, etc. But yeah, they were good to work with, and it was a good tour for us.
I want to mention, since you brought up it was Close to the Edge, that first tour, so many people, and rightly so, believe that Close to the Edge is the seminal prog rock album. But I've got to say, Octopus, I think, is right up there with it. Even just taking the song Knots alone, and then on that tour for that album, excerpts of Octopus, just even that, there's some really neat stuff. Were the members, what am I trying to ask? Was everyone always agreeable to how things were going to go? Because like Knots sounds so complicated to have written, especially being, the whole vocal thing rather than, on instruments. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit for us, Derek?
Well, it was written by Carey, actually, but it was scored by Carey. I mean, so it was written orchestral. I mean, as an orchestral piece. Yeah. So you had to sing these orchestral lines, and they merge into whatever you hear. So it was pretty difficult to do, but nevertheless, one thing that we did, we were hard workers. I mean, we were hard workers on the road. We were hard workers in on our rehearsals, as well as hard workers in the studio. So we worked very, very hard together to make sure that what we did vocally was how it was written. So was it difficult to do initially when we were given the pieces to sing? Yeah, we had to learn them, but we learned them, and we promoted them and produced them on stage. So and one thing that we did was to make sure our stage version was both musical, but something that is important and was important to us was also entertaining. And that's something which is very important for the fans that saw Gentle Giant. They didn't come away thinking that was kind of like going to see the New York Philharmonic, walking out, and that was a very we didn't want quietness. We wanted people to enjoy the experience and have smiles on their faces. So that's what we did anyway. So as far as the promoting and singing Knots on stage, ultimately it became something natural. We learned it and sang it on stage, and that was how we did it.
Yeah, not to mention the recorders, the acoustic guitar stuff, just phenomenal. And before we segue into, I know Steve wanted to ask you about another Steve. I want to apologize to everyone. I left the intro music on and it was looping and I couldn't even hear it on my end. I just realized that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, but it was quiet. It wasn't like over, like it wasn't clouding anything. So, Yeah, so I had another yes related question. But before getting to that, what do you think of the Steven Wilson remixes of the Gentle Giant material?
I think Stephen generally does a fantastic job for us. He understands. He's a friend. I mean, he's a friend and also a fan, but he's also a really good friend and understands the band and understands what it was and what it is we put into the music,
Yeah.
and doesn't put the stamp of Stephen Wilson produced. He listens to the tracks, and what he does is give them more air and give them more space, so you can hear the instruments much more with much more clarity than what we had across the board. I think just about every mix he's done, especially the missing piece actually, which is coming out in a couple of weeks. That I think John mentioned it in your last interview. It was very very bass light for a lot of reasons, and on this new version or new album or the new remix, you can actually hear Ray's playing, which is fantastic as always.
Yeah.
On the album, but Stephen really has a great ear and doesn't change anything. He'll just adjust things sonically, but keeps them the way they wanted, but gives every instrument and every voice a little more space so you can hear them much clearer.
Is there any discussion, Derek? Or does he just go do his thing?
No, he does his thing, and generally what he does is send over to myself and Carrie what he's done, and for the most part we just say, sounds great, go for it. I think there was one time when there was one, I think Carrie listened to something and it was some keyboard part which is didn't quite work, or sonically it didn't work for him. I think it was a freehand or whatever, but not a situation where we've said, Stephen, no, it doesn't work. Basically, what he does is spot on. I mean, he's got a fantastic ear, and he's a friend, and was a great and worked with Ray on other projects before that. And Ray, as you know, passed away this time last year, which devastating to all of us, and me particularly as my younger brother and my best friend. But anyway, he worked with him on many other projects, so they knew how to work together, on whatever projects there were.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah. And you were also something that's in the works has to do with playing the full, right? We were talking about it a little bit before going live here. And yeah, Dad is
I have to again. I have to.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, this is absolutely one of my favorite live albums. I have a few favorite live albums. Song Remains the Same, Yes Songs, Keys to Ascension, Queen Live Killers. This is absolutely right there with one of my favorites. I just love this album. And yeah, I know that you saw it, Derek, in the interview with John, but for those who didn't see it, I was introduced to Gentle Giant with this album when I was 14 years old, which would have been, do the math for me, Steve. My math brain is...
Yeah, that would have been 77. Yeah, that's funny. I think 14 was also when I got into Gentle Giant back in 2008, 2009.
Raised the boy right. There you go. Yeah, but let's spill some beans on that. What's happening with that and Steve Wilson?
Well, you've got the exclusive on this one because we've just been talking just last week with Stephen and a guy called Dan Bornemark, who has been very helpful. He lives in Sweden, in actually finding the old tracks and helping us get the catalog back to our own. We own the catalog, which is fantastic. So we've listened and we've decided to have Stephen remix the album, but at the same time go through all the shows as opposed to what is on the album. And we've decided to make it a triple album, which again, you've got an exclusive here because we listened to the other tracks and said, why don't we have Stephen remix those? And so it's the whole set as opposed to the ones we chose for that album. So we're working on that for a sort of late summer, August, September, October release for a new Stephen Wilson remix of the album.
That's awesome. I'm curious, Derek, why was it not a triple album back then? Was it restrictions from the label at the time? Was it just something most bands didn't do? Oh,
Yeah.
of course it wasn't something most bands didn't do.
I don't know, actually. I think it's, I mean, triple albums were, I mean, a double album, you know, for a fan to buy was digging in your pocket. And
Yeah, that's
you know,
true.
So I think that, I don't think there were I don't think anyone, well, maybe they did, but
The only triples I could think of from back then, Ray, would be 1974, Emerson, Lake and also the longest title on the planet, Emerson, Lake and Palmer's "Welcome Back, My Friends" to the show that never ends, ladies and gentlemen. Blah, 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 but also Yes songs, and those are the only
Right.
two that come to mind.
right, that's true. You're right. I don't know why. I mean, I think we just listened to the tracks that I think out of 4 shows we did in Europe, and we just decided that these are the ones that we're gonna, you know, put on this double album. But there's certainly about 5 or 6 other tracks that we played on that set that were recorded just as well.
I can't
So,
wait.
you know, and the intro as well. I mean, the intro is what I think is on there, but it's much longer. So all these other bits and pieces are going to be on this new version of.
Yeah, the missing pieces, you might say.
Yeah.
And what formats is it coming out on?
Well, it'll be vinyl, CD, Blu-ray,
Awesome.
across the board. You know, flat mix, everything else. You know,
Oh, that's great. Interesting. Thanks for sharing that with us. That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So by the late 80s, you became CEO of Atco Records. And so you were around when, yes, following John Anderson going to ABWH, we're considering a new lead vocalist, one of them being Billy Sherwood. Can you tell us a bit about that period?
Sure. This is a So we jumped from one thing to okay, sure. I knew Billy very well because Billy I signed when I was at Polygram to he was in I'm blanking on the name, World Trade.
Right.
And I really liked them. I thought they were a really great band. I signed them actually as I was moving over to Polygram, and then that was something which I was happy to do to make sure they got a really good deal. And I got to know Billy very, very well as a friend. And when Chris got in touch, and then I inherited Yes on part of the as part of my job as being the guy that ran Atco. And quite truthfully, there was a lot of things that were happening in that camp, as there always is, as you probably know.
Yeah.
With money, with memberships, and there was at least $1.5 million spent without having an album. So I introduced Chris. And so John was leaving or had left, and I introduced John to Chris to Billy, and Trevor Rabin was in that band. But ultimately, and I'm going to be truthful here, the costs of this album were flying so out of control. There was millions of dollars spent without having a note played, and they were continually asking for more money, and they were going pretty much to other things other than recording. Let me just put it that way.
Right.
Okay.
So, and this is a bizarre thing. I had to say, look, I don't think I can do with it. I don't think we can do this anymore. And the band that was Yes went over to Arista. So it's a sort of strange kind of bizarre twist that I was, like 10 or 15 years earlier, was on the road, working as the opening band for Yes, and here I was saying, "Sorry guys, we don't want you."
Yeah, weird how it works, huh?
But I'm still very great friends with them even today. I'm in touch with them all the time. So
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think you've done other work with Billy since,
Yeah,
right?
Billy and Steve and everyone. Yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah, I absolutely have been in
that's
touch with
great.
them. Good friends.
John mentioned in the interview with me last week that part of the disbandment of Gentle Giant was sort of somewhat unspoken on that last tour, and he felt that much to do with that had to do with the lack of label support at the time. My question in that area, Derek, is when you did become in a the power and the glory as a record executive, was there not an opportunity to kind of re-sign your own band to one of those labels where they'd be able to still perpetuate the career, or was it that prog just wasn't as in vogue anymore? I know in the US it wasn't. I was like an idiot. I was in a prog band in the early 80s, and by then it was all skinny tie new wave, or it was spandex and hairspray. But in the Netherlands and parts of Europe, prog was still very much alive, and we just couldn't get a deal because of that. So did that have anything to do with why you didn't bring Gentle Giant into one of the labels that you worked with?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, I mean, really, when John had mentioned that it was kind of an organic thing. That, the truth was when we all got together, and it was in New York, and we were still, in England, and we came over. Well, I was over here, but I think that both Carrie and myself were married. We had kids, and it just felt like had we continued to carry on, the musical horizons had changed, as you probably know. But apart from that, I think for all of us, it kind of felt like, okay, this pattern of touring, rehearsing, writing, touring, rehearsing, writing became something, I hate to say it, like a job. And when something becomes a job in the arts, in music, then it becomes something less creative and something which is, like clocking in your time clock. And
Yeah.
that kind of felt like that was what we were doing. It didn't affect our stage performance at all, but we loved that. I mean,
Right.
that was the hour and a half, 2 hours where we lived our lives, if you like.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But it just felt like it was a time at the time. So at the beginning of the tour, we actually said, look, this is Carrie and myself said, I don't think we really want to do this much longer. And there was a bit of an element of surprise to Gary and John. Ray was kind of on the fence about it, but we just said, okay, well, let's see how we do. And we did very well on that tour.
Mhm.
But it was really, we all knew it was at the last gig, we're going to say, okay, we had our run, we are on to new things. So really, when you ask me about reviving, sure, I could have done it, but that was a different chapter, a different
Yeah,
life.
that makes sense.
And the chapter for all of us moved. Ray became a producer,
Yeah.
and signed some fantastic bands. Kerry, went to things that he wanted to do, as did the other guys.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, and
And
looking
go
in
ahead.
the comments, I see we have something that's sort of related to that. So kind of putting one hat that you got later and imagining if you had that on a different time. Elizabeth Reese asks, how would you have promoted Gentle Giant's music differently if you had been a record label promoter at the time instead of in the band?
Well, the one thing I did learn immediately, because I jumped from being a musician to being in the music business, which is almost like becoming Darth Vader. I kind of felt like that, but you know what? It was something that I was offered, and I thought, well, is it something I want to do? Let me explore it. And I just remember the first day I worked at Polygram, and it was at the end of the first day, my heart sunk all the way to my feet, because I realized that the music business, how can I put this, was not the business I thought it was. It was about every artist having their priorities, and it was about politics. It was about money. It was about perks, and yeah, there was music involved, but that wasn't the prime motivation. Had I known that prior to that, I probably, having been overseeing the group with Ray, thought about, okay, so let me get Columbia or Capitol on my side by schmoozing or woozing or whatever it is. But you learn by doing it and experiencing it. So no, it was basically you need a champion who could make a difference in a record company, and I became that for many other bands ultimately. But in the days when we were on tour, we had champions that couldn't ring the green bell that said, okay, let's go for it, which is sad. But nevertheless, that being said, in some ways, I'm glad we didn't, because I hate to use the word because it sounds contrite and it sounds bloated, if you like, but we left a legacy which is untouched.
Yeah, and that's fair. Absolutely, you can use that. And in being instrumental in sung all those bands, after I gotta move my camp, she'll eat my plant. Get out of here. Sorry, baby. That makes me feel that perhaps when you saw what the music business really is at that time, how edgy was it for you to make the decision to sign the bands that you signed? Because obviously you had a criteria, you had things you looked for, listened for, but each one of those was a risk. And thankfully, so many have gone on to have decades-long careers. Were there some that felt either more risky to you than others, or were there somewhere no one else was supporting you, but you took a chance anyways, and they had a great career? Are there any stories like that in there, Derek?
Yeah, there are actually. There's quite a few, in fact. The one, I mean, this is the business side here as opposed to Gentle Giant, but what? The ones that went on to have lasting impact, if you like. I'll bring up the first signing I ever had. In fact, was at Polygram when I first started. Was Bon Jovi. Now, a lot of fans here will say, "Boo, hiss, boo." But
no, they're a great band.
The one thing that John Bon Jovi had when he sat in front of me as a 18-year-old kid, he told me, he literally looked me in the eye and said, "I want to be bigger than Elvis." And I thought he was joking. I thought, okay, this is some blowhard kid whose second cousin owns a power station. But the intensity and his drive and his ambition was something you couldn't capture, and that's something which I just learned from him, knowing that how much he would. I mean, they were so that's just a quick 2-minute way of knowing that something is going to happen. He knew he wanted that to be that, and he'd do everything in his world and whatever he did to make that happen. And it was something that you couldn't capture. We wanted to be musicians. I don't think the band Gentle Giant ever thought about being as big as possible. We just wanted to be great out there and entertain and make good music. John wanted to be a megastar, 100%, and you can't capture that. The other band that I bring up, if you like, is Pantera.
Oh,
which is some. I was running ACTO, and I saw a tape of theirs when I was at Polygram, but I went down to see them. excuse me, as running the company, and I went down, when you say, okay, well, show me what you got.
Yeah.
And it was a little club in Arlington, and they played to this 40, 50 kids in this club, and they were just mind-blowingly good. It was insanity. Phil Anselmo and Dimebag and Vinny and Rex. I didn't just look and say, I could work with them. I became a fan in the third song.
Wow.
And they had everything. They were that good and that powerful. And I knew that they would not get on MTV. They would not get on, which was a big marketing thing in those days. They would not get on a radio. But if I was blown away being this, honcho running a record company, then the kids who were there, who were like, the mosh pit was small because there was only a little hub. But if I took them out and put them out there in front of the world, they would think the same thing. And that's what I did. I put some money behind them as a touring situation. And sure enough, within a year or two, I mean, they became massive.
Yeah, I saw them open for Deep Purple when Ian Gillan was on vocals and Bev Bevan was the touring drummer. They were the second loudest band I've ever heard. I won't count who the very first band was I saw in a real venue was Led Zeppelin. I won't count that because I'd never seen a concert of that magnitude. So I don't count them. But the first loudest band was King Crimson on the, I think, Thrack tour. I've never done this in my life, Derek. I left after the third song. I was in the 8th row. John Paul Jones opened for them, thankfully. So I got to see that on his second tour. They were so loud. I was getting nauseous and Meniere's kicking in, and it was just unbelievable. But Pantera crushed it on stage. They were so good live.
What year was that? Just as a reference.
So Born Again with Ian Gillan, I want to say 89,
80,
maybe earlier, mid 80s, because they did the thing when Richie Blackmore came back in 84, I think. So it might have been 86 after that, something like that, mid 80s ish, I think.
No, because when they were signed as 89, when I signed them.
So then it must have been after that. Maybe Steve's looking it up. I might have the year wrong. I might even have the opening band. I mean, the band they played with, but I thought it was, but they were great. They were really loud, but they were great.
So, and the other thing you asked me about is that I don't think I signed a band that the other record companies would be chasing because they were the new thing.
Right. But how about your colleagues? Did you ever have colleagues saying, "Derek, don't do it. I'm not with you on this one," but you did it anyways? And what are a couple of those bands that you knew would just be, it was worth the risk, that other people weren't behind?
In some respects, Bon Jovi, because he had one track and he didn't have a band. And he had a job at the power station, and a couple of guys in the department said, "Yeah, he looks cute, but I mean, he's got one song." I mean, but I met with him, and I met with his mom and dad actually.
Oh wow!
And I just knew, and a couple of guys, is he a pop? Is it Rex Smith? Is it Eddie Van? We don't know what it is, and I knew what he wanted to be, and I said, "What?" I said to him, "What do you want to be?" He said, "I want to be a rock star." So other people were not sure about it, but I was sure about it with him, and I helped him in some respects see his vision through.
Awesome.
There are other things. For instance, Dream Theater. You mentioned Dream Theater. That was signed, believe it or not, on well, they had an album, I think, on another label, and it didn't do anything. They were dropped, and Mike Portnoy came with a 4-track instrumental, no vocals, but they were superb. And a guy called Derek Oliver, who worked with me, said, "You know what? We should look at this." And a couple of the other guys in the company, even though I was running it, said, "There's no vocal. We don't know what's going to be." But I sat down with Mike in the back, and said, "So where do you want to go with this?" They said, "We're going to get a great singer." And they presented the album with I think, who's the singer? Mike Produce.
Yeah.
And Yeah. So I mean, there's always questions, but if you have a champion and a champion that will stick their neck out for you and be able to hit the green light, if you like, then you've got a chance. That was back in the day. Today is a whole different animal. You know, it's just completely.
Right.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I want to switch gears and go back to Gentle Giant
Good.
in a very specific area. And if I can manage to press the right buttons, the area I want to show everybody and have you chime in on is fashion. So if I'm doing the math right, Derek, from 1972 to 1974 isn't really that much time, right? Yet, when I think of my two favorite Gentle Giant concerts that I've seen, and I look at how you guys were dressed back in like 72, almost kind of like more hippie-ish,
I
Renaissance-y.
think that might be 74, and the other pics we have are from 78.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I got the years wrong. Okay, thank you, Steve. Now you know why I need a babysitter, Derek, even though it's my baby.
I'm wearing my dress here.
Yeah, and then fast forward slightly, a bit more of a pedestrian look. You know, John with his Oakland A's uniform. You know, we've got you in the jumpsuit, Ray in the vest, and so on. Was that a conscious thing, or did you see a shift in music and fashion coming as time moved closer towards the 80s?
That's a good point. Please excuse the jumpsuit, everyone, because it looks, on retrospect, it looks so stupid.
I love it. You jumping around in a jumpsuit. That's what it's for.
Yeah, okay. But, you know, again, please forgive me. You know, it looks like Freddie Mercury on steroids or something. But yeah, you make a good point, because it's, I guess we were changing a little musically, and so again, putting the fashion and the music together, we were honing it down to a degree from the earliest days, and I think that our music reflected more of a rock element, as well as, you know, what we could do musically. So I guess our fashion was more in line with being able to jump around a little more, as opposed to being, you know, me wearing a dress and Gary wearing a Robin Hood suit.
Right.
So yeah, a good point, and I guess it was subliminal. You know, that's all I can say. There was something that in the music that made us change our uniforms, as we call, you know, and our stage suits, the stage gear. So you know, and John wearing his Oakland A's uniform, you know, and to tell you the truth, if you saw us at the beginning of the tour and saw us at the end of the tour, you wouldn't want to get any close to us, because the clothes literally stood up on their own. As you know, it's very difficult to get washing done after you know, when you do days after days on the road.
Yeah, and not having 4 sets of everything.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. A couple other comments. Chuck Michelson says, love to hear a Steve Wilson remix of In a Glass House.
We would too. In fact, Stephen, that was the very first request he made back in the day. He said, I'd love to remix In the Glass House. And we searched and searched and searched, and no one could find the multis.
Oh wow.
So that's one where I think Stephen's touch would be absolutely magnificent, because that initially, for me anyway, and for the band, that was a very difficult record to make, and it was very hard for us, because that was the album after my brother Phil left.
Yeah,
and I didn't. I mean, it was very tough for both myself and Ray, but when I hear it now, I love it. I mean, I think it's really a really great album. Crazy, but great.
Yeah, the live pieces come off really well. Yeah. So it's interesting that the multis are nowhere to be found. Maybe they were launched into space in a time capsule with some other stuff or something.
No, I hope it comes back and crashes into Manhattan. I pick it up and and we'll give it to Steve. But because it's very dry, it was I mean literally it was written and produced and released in a period of 6 weeks. It was so quickly done. We always wrote very quickly and produced things. You know, we didn't ponder our work. We worked. We're hard workers. We really were.
That's great.
But this is the one which I feel the same way, that it would be great if Stephen was able to do this, but we can't find the notice.
Oh wow, maybe they'll show up sometime, and I might have to, get up and kick my cat out. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. So while we're talking about those albums, do you have like any interesting nuggets to share about the Interview album, since we're in an interview, so we might as well talk about that?
Well, Interview was the album after the live album. It was a good album, but the premise, before we spoke, we were chatting about the ways people used to, especially in North America, we were taking around, we'd say we'd come to a city, and we'd have the promotion guy saying, okay, this radio wants to speak to you, this radio person wants to speak to you, and they really didn't do the homework. I mean, they didn't know who the hell we were.
Wow.
So even though we toured or maybe they didn't want to do their work, and this is a gig they had to do, so they got this band who were playing in town to come over and ask us questions, which were basically, what's your, how did you? It's just the same old. Yeah. And they didn't delve into jumping into things that you delve into, or other people who know the band delve into. They didn't know anything about the past or the history or anything else, but the standard interview. How many in the band? What's your latest album? Et cetera, et cetera. And it became, I guess, in some ways, I can't think of the word, but anyway, it was a little
kind of monotonous, repetitive,
frustrating. Yeah.
Vanilla. There's a great question in the comments I'm going to show on screen from Zachary, because this ties into something I wanted to ask. He says, this year marks the 50th anniversary of The Power and the Glory. How do you feel about looking back on that album today? And with that, how does it feel to be in your 70s and have your music from so long ago still be so relevant to so many people?
Well, first of all, to answer the question about looking back on The Power and the Glory, I think it's probably one of our best albums, both recording wise and lyrical wise. And I think the fact that the subject matter and the music as well, of course, still holds up, if you like, today. And thinking back, I mean, I think, when I saw you with John, I look back and think, wow, did I do that? I mean, or did I write that, or did we play that? And the fact that it's still relevant, and today in today's atmosphere, especially in the atmosphere of this polarizing,
right, yeah,
awful situation, the lyrics and the music and everything else is still very relevant, and it's 50 years since we did it, and the fact that it's still as relevant as it was back in the day, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of my favorite albums. It was one of the easiest albums we made.
Oh wow. The tour was great too. Yeah.
We were very mature as a band then, and we were riding quite a wave. I mean, we were headlining some pretty big gigs in Europe, especially, and North America, and we were on a roll. So we were on our game.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. There's a couple different questions that are rather the same question from different people on different channels watching, asking what it was like working with Steven Wilson. And folks, you might have missed it, but Derek said, extremely frustrating. They're never doing it again. Next question. No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Derek mentioned he's been a friend, great to work with. But this is an interesting question from Chuck Michelson. Also asked, "Will progressive rock ever become retro cool, or is it too inaccessible?" And I'm not sure how you mean, Chuck, but how do you interpret that, Derek?
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting to me. In 2021, my son Noah, who is worked at Sony Legacy actually, but he's left that now. Put together a video of Proclamation out of the Power and the Glory, and from fans who went online and played the music of Gentle Giant.
I saw that. It's awesome.
Okay, so you see who the fans are, and they're not fans of old farts like me. They're fans who are in their 20s and even teens and 20s and 30s who love the music.
Yeah.
And they're really good. I mean, so the fact that they're playing along and playing their parts tells me that, cool or not, there are musicians and people who love real music. I'm not saying the Gentle Giant is the epitome of it, but will always be, whether it's progressive or symphonic or even pop, will always love real music as opposed to something which is composed on a Pro Tools or
to dance to. Not that your music isn't all danceable, but
no, exactly.
You might throw a hip out on a couple of songs I could think of.
Yeah. So anyway, that's something which is that is fascinating, and it was great to see these young guys playing our music and loving it and enjoying it. So talking about cool, the other side of the coin, if you don't mind me bringing this up, is
please,
this world of hip hop.
Yeah,
which is I don't know if you are aware that the people, some of the big tastemakers in hip hop and the biggest artists are enamored by our band.
Oh wow!
We've been at the top of the charts at the beginning of the year with Travis Scott, who opens his album with Proclamation.
Wow, that I didn't know.
So
that's interesting.
If you look at Travis Scott and he opens his show with Proclamation, there's a band called Run the Jewels which has sampled Knots, and
wow,
and so we've become the darlings of the hip hop world.
That's neat.
And I think that in some ways, some of the more interesting progressive bands, and this is going to sound bizarre to a lot of people out there, are in the hip hop world. They turn things and move things around that I think we did before, and so did Yes, and so did other bands of our ilk.
That's so interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I have one more comment to share. Robin Pearson says, I saw you. I think it might take up too much of the screen. Let's try it. Oh, there we go. I saw you in the 70s at Portsmouth. Gentle Giant's music has held a special place in my heart since those days. I think the complex structure of your music is one of the reasons that it has been so sustaining and enduring for me and other fans. Would you agree, Derek? Yes.
I hope so.
Yes. Yeah. I find it interesting because the things he points out as being endearing is what has turned off a lot of people who, for lack of better words, maybe aren't musos. So they're into something that's just 4 on the floor, something they can dance to, something they don't need to think about. But there's always an audience for everything. I mean, that's why there's so many genres of music.
Yeah. I think that sometimes people underestimate younger audiences. Like, I feel like as soon as people, when they're teens or when they get into college and they're like discovering like what they're into, and they'll get into music, and some of them, and I've seen this firsthand with friends of mine, they'll like really dig deep into like music that's very different from just what's on the radio or whatever, and they'll like champion it, like, so they'll go back and discover some prog rock and be like, oh, what can I listen to that's more like this type of thing,
Well, again, I just will say that in some ways, you asked earlier about would I re-signed. No, I think the fact that we we did what we did, and we did it for, honestly, we did it because we love music. We love pushing ourselves musically.
Right.
Internally, we were driven internally, and we tried to be better for each other, and then taking it on stage and entertaining the audience and playing with some kind of smile on our faces, being able to do what we did, I guess, and having an audience walk out with a smile on their faces because they were entertained as well as hopefully musically entertained also. But the fact that we didn't continue, I think is good, because sometimes when you do that, you try to relive something you did 10, 12 years ago, and or you become some kind of parody of what you were. And that's one thing that the band, I know each person, we're still in touch, we're still great friends. We never want to be a parody of ourselves.
That's awesome that you guys did, stay in touch. We don't see that with a lot of bands, which is really cool. And it speaks to, I think, the time you spent together creating and touring and doing what you did. Oh, I had a question. It just flew out of my brain. This may sound like a dumb question, but is there such thing as getting signed anymore? Or is it more you have to come out as your own publisher, or you got to prove yourself as an independent artist first before a quote label takes a chance on you? What does that business side of the scape of the music industry look like compared to, say, the 70s, Derek?
The whole world has changed. I mean, since the advent of the internet, of course, and the advent of having music be streamed and or being able to make music on the computer when you're not a musician,
right?
And that's something that I feel very sad about, actually, because when I started with my brothers, I was in school, and we toured our asses off in my first group before Gentle Giant. I mean, everywhere and every night, and we got no sleep. But we became good. We became good at what we did, musically.
Right, doing it a lot too.
Yeah, and there were places to do that, and we wanted that to be. But today, everyone wants to be famous without putting the work in, and that's unfortunate to me. It doesn't say, it doesn't bode well for someone who wants to be a great musician, because you have to put a huge amount of work in to get there. And today, it's much more difficult to get signed, honestly, to a label, because labels, quite honestly, rely on their catalogs.
Yeah,
a new band, except for Taylor Swift or Beyonce or whatever, those things, they are long in developing. But quite honestly, musical, you have to go out there and do what we did back in the day, is go out there and build your audience one fan by one fan and become really, really good. And also the other thing is just be unique. Don't care about what other people are doing. Do something which is yours.
Yeah, that's great advice. And the economics are completely different in the industry. Even if you look at the standpoint of putting on a live production, what it costs now for trucks and lodging and the stage show and the rigging and all of that, and then studios now. And it's a whole different world. Like you said, it really is in every way, every direction.
It is, but you know what? It's still, you still can do it. I mean, if you really want to do it, you can still. You don't have to have the production. If you're good enough and unique enough, then go out there and do it, and don't worry about what anyone else says. Just build your audience and be really great. Be unique, be great, and it doesn't matter if a label will sign you or not. You will get there. But a lot of people who don't want to put the time in, won't put the time in. And that It takes time and it takes a lot of effort. But you have to have, blinkers on and say, I don't care what this says. I'm going to live on bread and water or live with my mom until I'm 50, whatever it takes.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I live with my mom. That's another story.
Well, my wife's my mom, so what can I say?
And referencing what Steve mentioned earlier about a younger generation. Steve actually lived that. He's 29, and I think most of what you listen to is prog, right, Steve? I mean, almost all of it.
Yeah, most of it, but I do dabble in a few different genres here and there. It's funny, I was actually listening to an old podcast recently where someone was like, yeah, most people, when they say they listen to everything, they don't really, but I literally
They
listen
don't
to
even know what everything is.
So
Yeah,
I wouldn't say I
funny
listen to
statement.
everything, but definitely like several different genres I like
Yeah.
to dip
I think
into.
people say that who don't know what they are actually listening to.
Right.
I've never heard a real music fan say that.
But
Mm.
the interesting thing about the genres, if you like, today, and when we started out, I mean, in England, in a different band in Simon Dupree, and Gentle Giant as well, there wasn't quite as much delegation of types of music. I mean, we played with different kinds of bands. I think John mentioned playing with the Eagles on a bill. We played Sha Na Na. We played with Jay Giles. It wasn't, we both went up. It wasn't a time when if you like this band, then you shouldn't like the other band.
Right. And the radio wasn't like that. I love telling the story that growing up in Los Angeles, starting to play the drums shortly before I turned 7, so like late 69, and then into 70, 71, 72. Those years, I would just put on headphones, turn on the 93 KHJ was the station, and I'd hear Neil Diamond, then the Rolling Stones, then Led Zeppelin, then Barbra Streisand, for goodness sakes. It was just a mix. There was almost no, there was that. Then there was maybe country, which at the time was Gene Autry and Johnny Cash. And then there was the classical stuff. And that was about it, other than talk radio back then.
That's correct. And then it became corporatized in the mid to late 70s. And then that's when the hit song from the album became a very important factor. And that's if you like, in certain respects, for some bands like Genesis, who had a hit song, which crossed over to pop, were able to survive. And we were hopeless at writing hit songs.
You don't think Knots is a single? You don't think Knots is a single?
Maybe today it would be. Maybe, in fact, it was a hit single for Run the Jewels.
Ah, nice.
It was a lead track on Black Panther.
Ah, wow.
So but
you never know.
But no. So there was a change in radio, which is the main form of marketing, if you like, in the late 70s, and I think that's together with punk, coming in and being, what it scared people in the music business or innovated or energized it, was something of a shake-up for everyone, including the band and bands of our ilk, if you like, as well.
Yeah. Interesting. I'd like to share one last question from the audience before we go. And when we do go, Derek, please stay on the line with Steve and I just for a couple minutes, okay? This is from Yves Boulay. I hope I'm pronouncing it.
Yves Boulay, I think it's pronounced.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Where did it go? There it is. He said,
question for you: was Freehand one of Gentle Giant's most powerful harmonies?
I didn't hear it. Sorry.
Was Freehand one of Gentle Giant's most powerful harmonies?
Well, I mean, I think Freehand as an album was a really powerful album. And harmonically, as far as singing is concerned, I think it was quite well done. I think the whole playing was well done, and it was a great album. It's one of my favorites too. I have 2 or 3 favorites, 1 or 2, not some of the fans' favorites, but I think it's it was well written, well played, and we were able to take it on the road and play it fairly well. So with vocal harmonies as well. I can't sing 2 voices, so either Carrie or Ray or Gary or John would harmonize with me, and we could all sing, which is good, and we could all play guitar. The one that you mentioned in another interview about what we were able to do, and we could all trade instruments and play each other's instruments. So that was a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, that's neat. Thanks. Tell everybody what you're up to now.
What I'm up to is I'm actually involved in 2 or 3 music documentaries, musical documentaries, which
Oh, nice.
story about some of the things either I've been involved in and or other things that I've done, but they're kind of interesting. One is about in 1991, when I was running ATCO, we put on the biggest ever outdoor show in the world ever in Moscow.
Oh, wow.
Monsters of Rock, and we took over AC/DC, Metallica, Pantera, Black Crowes, and a Russian band, and 1.7 million people attended it.
Wow.
With a story behind it.
Wait, were there bathrooms?
Are you kidding? We're talking about Moscow in 1991.
Oh.
It was just after the wall came down. Yeltsin, it was the perestroika time. Anyway, the story behind it is, apart from the concert, which was the most incredible concert you would ever see. It was just mind-blowing. But the story of corruption and bringing over bags of $1 million worth of $100 bills to pay off Boris Yeltsin and the army, and flying back on the Concorde to get more money to allow the concert to continue.
Wow.
So that's one of the documentaries. And the other ones, in fact, my son Noah is working on a documentary with a very well-known hip hop / music presenter. I won't say his name.
Okay.
He's on the Tonight Show. About the influence of Gentle Giant, both in the music world, which we had no idea about, but also in the hip hop world.
Interesting. Yeah, you talked about some of that, and that's really interesting.
So and there's a couple more, but anyway, I'm involved in those, and I'm overseeing a couple of friends, but I'm not in the trenches. I'm too old for that stuff. I'm decrepit, and
No, you're not. Well, do you still have the jumpsuit?
But boy, I couldn't get. When I saw myself, when I look back and think, what the hell was I thinking?
Well,
I think we've all been through that.
Yeah, I was thinking that. You're right. I was thinking about that, something I did yesterday. Thanks so much, Derek, for taking time with us. Please hang on the line after we say goodbye to the audience. And audience, thank you so much for following what we do here on Yes Shift and simulcasting on Drum Talk TV. You can find Yes Shift audio only at anchor.fm/Yes Shift and on YouTube at www.youtube.com/@YesShift and Facebook.com/Yes Shift. And the Drum Talk TV channels on pretty much everything is at Drum Talk TV. Thanks, everybody. More to come soon. We've got just tons of new stuff. We're front loading the year. I can't believe it's almost the end of the first quarter. But Steve and I will see you soon, and I'll see you soon on Drum Talk TV as well. Thanks, everyone.
See you, everyone.